just finished reviewing all your videos, and I got my book of notes here for you. So, you did really well. Your test was fine. Nothing wrong with that. I'm going to go through, I've got, first off, I'm going to answer some of the questions you sent me, and then I've got a couple of pages of notes on what I saw in your exam. So, alright, first thing I've got written down here is your spitting wine technique looks better. You were, as you recall, bending forward rather than folding in the middle. Now you're folding, which is really important. You can't get the fujin, the floating energy, to work if you bend rather than fold, okay? One of the things I noticed when you're doing your lotus stepping practice, make sure you keep your eyes up. You're getting a couple of those little wushu habits where when you're doing your drunken, you'll start looking down and lolling your head and things like that. Keep your eyes on your opponent. Always imagine where the opponent is. It's really important. And always have your eyes on them. Always, always, always. Your exercise with the jar and without the jar. First of all, very cool. And cooler, I think, than you realize. That exercise is the beginning of sloshing. And there's a lot to sloshing. I don't even know if I really talked about it in the videos. I haven't talked about it in the video, I know that. But I don't even think I really mentioned it in the books with any real detail. Sloshing is sort of the thing that starts to tie drunken boxing together. And normally I wouldn't even mention it to somebody at your level right now, but you're coming together really fast and you're already building techniques that look like it. So that's the way it should be. We should talk about it. So sloshing, the drunken saying is hollow body, wine belly. So you imagine your dantian basically as a wine vessel, a gourd. And when you slosh, if I stand up here, when you slosh, if I were to slosh a technique, it's like a fajin, right? I turn the waist and all that sort of stuff. But there's another mental image goes with it. And that slosh is that the wine filling your belly, because the body is now hollow, it sloshes out and makes the end of the arm heavier. So when I do my technique, whichever side I do it, I should have this feeling of heaviness growing all the way through my body, all the way through my limb. Very, very important, okay? So I'm going to go over it again in detail on like what the order of these things is. First thing you need is the 6 harmonies theory. So the 6 harmonies: shoulder, elbow, wrist, hip, knee, and ankle. And in our drunken, the 6 harmonies are used from the inside out. So the shoulders and the hips basically move together, basically. Because we all know that really, it's your dantian, the center of your body, that moves first, which means physiologically your hips move at the beginning. So that hip movement takes place, and then the shoulders start to follow that hip movement. Then the elbows will start to travel, as will the knees at the same time, and then exponentially going outwards, you've got your wrists and your ankles that are going to make the last technique, the last movement. Even in the body shakes, when you're doing this kind of stuff, I know you can't quite see my feet here, but when you're doing this kind of stuff, you should feel the ankles turn at the same point in time that you'd feel the wrists kind of have that explosive force. That's the basic fajin. Now, where you get the chenjong, the heavy energy, intangible heaviness is what that means. That intangible heavy energy comes from the hollow body wine belly theory, which is sloshing. So we do the exact same thing. All of the harmonies work after dantian, but dantian is now that full of wine feeling. And what you do is when you turn your dantian, if you imagine it as something large, like a jar, with about half full of water. If you were to take that jar and give it a quick shake, a quick movement, all of that water is going to move, and all of that weight, because water is very dense, very heavy, all that weight's going to move. If you were to make that jar, do that movement and then let it go, what would happen? The water would slam into the walls of it. It would splash all the way through the entire jar, increasing the weight of whatever area of the jar it hit, right? Because there'd be more mass there. So what we're trying to do with our body is when we move our dantian, this is the slosh, the beginning of the sloshing exercise, is when we move our dantian, okay? All I'm doing here is the rocking and swaying stuff that I teach to beginners. But I'm no longer trying to just move my hips and my head and all of that sort of stuff, triple dantian theory. I'm trying to get a feeling inside my belly of water, wine in this case. Wine, it's very important. Sloshing around. So if this was my dantian, this is my wine. I want to get this feeling that it's circling, okay? either direction. I want it to be circling. Once you've got that circling feeling, you should be heavy feeling. So your belly feels very heavy, and if you were to suddenly stop, it would be very hard. It would kind of throw you around. That's what we're looking for. Now when you throw a technique, so even just a basic drunken punch, this, you turn dantian, the wine spins, the slosh begins, and you slosh that wine down to the end of your fist. And then you recoil the wine back. Very important that you keep the heavy energy inside you, okay? Not in your arms at all times. It has to enter the arms and then return. And that's why you see this kind of thing all the way, all the time in our drunken, okay? In the Fa-Jin, you don't want to do the Fa-Jin where you hold your arm out, okay, for this one. You want your arm to fill with heavy energy. The explosion, if you will, happens. And then you want to recoil your dantian first in order to pull your arm back, and that's going to suck all the wine back. It's kind of a weird play on the mind, on the E, but you'll start to feel it if you train it. Just take basic techniques, the drunken punch, slosh into it, slosh into it. You can see even when I go slow, I'm not leaving my arm. I'm pulling my arm back, okay? And that's even a bad word. I'm not pulling my arm back. I'm pulling my dantian back, which in turn recoils my arm. It's not like I go dantian first, 6 harmonies, slosh, wham, and then I pull my arm back. Don't get into that kind of habit. Boom, okay? Really, 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 really connected, but very loose, very heavy. There's another drunken saying, right? Arm like a rope, fist like a stone. And that's what we're talking about, is the rope arm. We want this whole body, I mean, it doesn't mean arm, it can mean leg too. Any of the limbs can be very, very loose, but the end of it has to hit like a stone. It has to be a good, proper fist, whatever fist or position you're using. You add the power by sloshing. Okay. Now, Damien, this is for you. I'm going to post some of this video and not all of it. The dantian theory. In book 2, you're going to see, I make mention of it, and I think the picture was actually even erased out of the book. The dantian is like a sphere, and inside that sphere are 2 balls, okay? Now, imagine, if you will, that those 2 balls, what they represent, and they're inside the sphere hard, really, really hard, as though they were a set of medicine balls. Leanne, can you throw me my medicine balls? On the top, I think they are. Anyway, there's a pair. I believe there's a nice little thing over there. Anyway, you imagine that these 2 balls are the wine. They're representative of the weight of the wine inside the dantian. Okay, look on the very top. There's a cloisson case. Yeah. There we are. So they're representative of the wine inside the dantian. Okay. Now, I don't know how much you know about mechanics, like actual mechanics. But these 2 balls would be residing in your dantian just like they do in your hand. So they're like this. There's no place for them to go, but they can spin freely all of the time. Okay? Now, this spinning action is representative of the wine. So if my hand is the dantian, my hand starts to turn, right? And that makes my body go. Normally, when you first start training, your dantian is all locked up. There's a bunch of different stages to this. I should probably even just talk about the different stages. Imagine one of these balls is dantian. Okay, I'm going to come forward here. This is dantian here, okay? Now, at a low level of training, everybody has a dantian, right? It's the way life is. But the dantian resides in basically like a gear in your waist, but the gear is holding onto it like this. What that means is that when the dantian tries to turn, I'm going to just turn it with my fingers, the dantian tries to turn, it pulls the rest of the gear with it. This is exactly how everybody starts, but this is nowhere near sloshing yet. What will happen is over time, and there's no 2 ways around this, you have to just train and train and train until this happens. Over time, you're going to feel these fingers start to let go, and your dantian is going to reside on top instead of the gear, instead of clamped by it, okay? And this is usually when you're going to start to get different feelings. Remember the 3 major questions of dantian? What does it look like, feel like, and sound like? You probably won't be able to get it when it's here because you can barely see your dantian. You can barely see it in my hand. But as it opens up, as these strings of karma are removed, that gets into a whole other thing, but as these strings are removed, then dantian starts to move more freely, and it has a slight delay before it moves. Can you see what I'm doing here? I'm turning the dantian and then it moves my hand. I'm turning the dantian and then it moves my hand. There's a slight delay between the dantian moving and the pelvis moving, and you'll start to feel it. The next stage, what will happen much later, I mean this takes years usually, is that dantian will feel like there's probably something still holding it from underneath here. It'll float free, it'll float above. And then this delay increases. Okay, the dantian will move and then this delay will increase. What that delay does is it's basically a gear ratio. So if you think about a bicycle, like a 10-speed bike, if you're in first gear, it's a very large gear and the chain moves very freely, but it doesn't create much force. If you're in 10th gear, it's a very small gear, and because it's a small gear, it's very hard to move. It's hard to get it to start moving, but it creates a lot of force really, really fast. This is 10th gear, is what we're talking about here. Okay? And it's just, I'm telling you these stages because you're going to know, I can see it in your body. You're going to start feeling this stuff happen. So just keep training for it. Now, the inner structure. In the dantian, you've got these two balls. So, these two balls, like I said, are moving like this. This is how they can move inside the dantian. It's a perfect sphere. I'd love to build a model of this, like a hamster ball with a couple little balls inside it. Now, if these are representative of the wine, what we want to do is, before dantian even moves, we want our wine to be moving. So I'm just going to use one because I'll drop it otherwise. So you can see what's going on. As dantian moves, the wine starts to slosh around in my hand. Okay, of course there's two of these, which means you start to get this happening, which is equal and opposite force on both sides of the sphere at all times. Now, once this is going on, then we get to the clutch theory. If you think about an automobile, you've got a shaft spinning, okay? And the clutch pulls things off of that shaft and then allows them to go back onto it and clamp down so that power can be fed to the wheels. What we want to do is we want to have a clutch theory so that we can get this wine spinning in our dantian, and then with our proper breathing for Fa-Jin, we clamp down on it. Because dantian's like moving, wanting to move, wanting to move, wanting to move. And when dantian clamps down on these two balls inside, they'll spin it extraordinarily fast, and that will ripple through your body. It's basically adding a new gear ratio. If this was 10th, we're going into a 16 gear bike all of a sudden. Hopefully this makes sense. It's hard to do it without you here to talk to. So basically what you're trying to do is, if I get my dantian spinning, so I'm just going to physically do this so you can see it. So I'm going to just start the sloshing exercise, okay, which is just like what you had with the barrel here. But when you did the barrel, the jar, you were moving the jar to move your body. Make sure you move your body to move the jar, okay, because the arms never move. Arms aren't moving. So now when I get this sloshing happening, let my body start to integrate it, and I can increase the frequency. So you can see I'm moving at a specific speed. As I increase the speed, the frequency, that wine is going to start hitting harder and harder and harder as it circles. It's like water circling a drain. As that happens, force is building. And when you clamp down, which is done by the torso, when you do that exhalation for the Fa-Jin, you clamp down with the muscles in the torso all the way through the intercostals. That movement in the dantian is transferred into the hips, and it's going to really move your body really, really fast. So the wine's moving, you tighten up the abdomen and the intercostals, and this movement continues, and it turns the dantian really fast, really, really hard. So start off with lower frequencies, and clamp down, and then get to higher and higher frequencies. If you were here,